So how to do those experiments? That's very tricky part, right? You can't write a story in a paper and say, hey, it's a very interesting phenomena, can you publish it? That's interesting, but can you prove it? How will you prove it scientifically that this works, right? So that's what we thought, okay, let's do it. It's pretty interesting. And at the end, I will tell you what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of this kind of study. So what we did was something like this. So now let me go to the, so this all you know, right? So these are the proprioceptions, the body's ability of joint positions, and that is the intrinsic coordinates without looking at them, right? And the proprioception is generally by these. You can see these are the stretch receptor kind of thing. You can see if I pull this will be pulled and then it will go to your spinal cord and then to your supraspinal centers. So supraspinal centers are called brain centers, starting from the brain stem. So if you see the picture of the brain, this is kind of brain where your motor cortex or all decision capabilities are there. And then it goes from the brain stem to your spinal. And spinal is kind of a pattern generator. It does not have its own intellectual, it borrows intellectual from the brain and then it goes to your muscles, right? So spinal cord is like of a grid, 1 0 1 0 1 0 0 1 pattern, like this pattern. It does not like accept the reflexes. Spinal cord is supposed to have only pattern generator, that is called central pattern generator. That's what I gave you that example. If you pick the kid, he's like crawling, it's a pattern, right? So just imagine walking is like a pattern, right? Just assume that 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0. So in leg, let us say 16 muscle, and they 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0, all this, and my spinal cord is just firing them 1 0 1 0 1 0, and I'm walking, right? So seems like brain has no role in that, but actually it's not like that. If brain is not involved in walking, then suddenly you drink the alcohol and your walking pattern changes. I don't know whether you drink or not, but if you drink, you can feel it, right? It means there is the effect of brain. Brain is playing a very significant role because your alcohol is not going to your spinal cord, right? And second thing, the traumatic brain injury, Mike discussed about it. Whenever you have a head injury, right? Have you done this kind of a experiment when you were a kid, like rotating like this for a long while, and suddenly after 4 rounds, even if you stand, you feel like this? Not brain, right? The vestibular system is not able to confirm whether you are still rotating or it is the residual information, right? So brain has a very, earlier up to some point of time, people thought, okay, spinal cord is actually good enough for walking. Brain has no significant role. But then this lot of experiment like Parkinson's, you see, it's completely neurological disorder, but they feel very difficulty in walking. Alcoholic person, their walking pattern immediately changes, right? And many others, right? So the idea was like, and that's what's happened in the boy. When you pick the baby boy, the spinal cords are still active, but the brain is not there. Brain takes some time to actually learn how to. So the pattern is there, but these patterns should go with what forces, how much contraction. That takes some time to actually learn all these patterns. So now the question is, if for me, if it's very easy for me, right, to actually close my eyes and actually drink it, right? Once it is in my intrinsic coordinate, I don't need to open my eyes, right? I can just do like this and then I drink. No need of vision, right? No need of sight. But if you carefully see somebody who has lost his hand, and he's even having an artificial hand, even though it's in intrinsic coordinate of his artificial body, whenever he is drinking water, he is constantly looking on whether it has touched his lips or not. You know why? Because there is nobody in the artificial hand who will tell to the brain, okay, he has reached to the lips, right? So he relies more on his visual inputs. He will constantly look, even they will fall down sometimes, right? The problem is they don't have the feedback, proprioception feedback, right? That's why here, what if someone loses the limb? Because when he loses the limb, he will lose the muscles, and the sensors were actually integrated in the muscles, right? So if you lose the limb, you lose the muscle, you lose the sensors. Means there is nobody to tell to the brain where is the position of your hand in the space, right? So now, how to solve it? How to provide it, right? So now the question is this experiment, which I explained. Is it possible that I give proprioception, hint of proprioception to other hand, which is correct, and you translate that hint or cueing to the other hand and then pick the bottle or whatever from that hand, right? So we framed our question like this, that does providing proprioception to contralateral limb help in myoelectric control? Or the specific research question comes like this: what if my left hand knows what my right hand does? Got this point? So what if my left hand knows what I'm doing from my right hand? And that is only possible. How they are connected to each other? Through brain. Right? That is the only way they can communicate to each other. They cannot communicate like this. Hey, what are you doing? He has to tell it to my brain, then my brain will tell, hey, I'm doing good, then it goes back. Right? So can I use this kind of modality and see if artificial, so what we felt is based on this kind of very simple experiment, we felt, yeah, it should help actually. Maybe up to what level we don't know, but it should help. Now the question is to prove it, whether it helps or not, right? So we designed an experiment, kind of this. So very, very complicated experiment, looks very simple, but to be very honest, it took almost 6 months just to code the computer for this kind of experiment. So let me explain you the experiment. It's a very, very interesting experiment, and the entire story is covered in this and the next slide. The rest of the things are just the results. Okay, this is a guy, healthy guy, who has both the limbs correct. So let me briefly explain you. So if I ask you, there is a computer screen, you have a mouse. I ask you, can you click on my computer icon? What you will do, you will move mouse something like this, you will click it, right? Now if I ask you that I will not allow you to move your hand, rather what I will do is the position of the cursor, the coordinate of the cursor, I will transform to your muscle contraction. You're getting this point? If I contract this, the cursor will go this side. If I contract this muscle, I'm not moving, I'm just contracting, right? You did see the experiment in the morning, he did not move and just contract only. So there is Emg activity. So if I contract this muscle, the cursor will go this direction. If I contract this muscle, the cursor will go this side. If I move this, if I contract this, it will go up, it will go down. So now if you learn this training, you should be eventually reached to the my computer without moving your hand. Fine? And this was done purposefully. I'll tell you why we did like this. But this was the kind of new learning for your brain. Because he is trained for doing like this, but suddenly I stop it and I say, hey, you can't do this, but I can help you in connecting your muscles contraction to the coordinate of that mouse, coordinate of that cursor, and then you move it based on that. Okay. So now let me explain you this experiment. So this strap is like this. So somebody comes, he sits in my chair, and the experiment starts. He will put his hand like this, right? He cannot move his hand. It's fixed. You can see the strap here. So he cannot move his hand, right? But what he can do is he can contract his muscles. And in the second hand, you can see he is holding a kind of motor handle, right? He's holding the motor handle. Now what happens? There are two kind of targets in the computer screen. One target is called 1D target. 1D target means if you contract only one muscle, you will reach there. It can be either here or it can be either here. So I can explain you this very easily. Okay. Just imagine that kind of 2D, it's plain. If I have to reach in this direction, I just contract one muscle. If I have to reach in the direction, I contract one muscle. But if I have to reach somewhere in between, I have to simultaneously know. Little bit this way I can reach there. Right? So I will call them 2D targets. And the other are just 1D targets. If you contract one muscle, you go there. If you contract this, you go there. But if you want to reach somewhere in the space, then you have to contract both the muscles and you will reach there. Clear? Okay. Now, okay. So now what happens is this experiment has four kind of situations. One situation is the target comes, it may be 1D or 2D, and you contract your muscle, you click it. Fine? You can see the target, you can click the target. Second condition is you can see the target, and at the same time, what is the location of this target in the space, I will give you through that motor. You're getting this point? So let us say in the previous, let us say the experiment start, and the cursor is here, and as soon as the experiment starts, the cursor goes here. Right? So the cursor goes here means I will move the handle this way. So that, of course, you can see where it is going, but I am giving you a artificial information that, okay, it is going this way also. Fine. Third situation is that the cursor will come, but you cannot see it. Right? So cursor will come somewhere in the screen, but you cannot see it. But what I will do is, what is the location of the cursor? I will give you the hint from this hand. Like, for example, it went there, so I will move this way. If it goes there, I will move this way. If it goes up, I will do this way. And how far it will go, accordingly, I will move here. Got the point? Fourth condition is you can't see. Neither I will give you feedback from any hints from there, neither you can see. You just click based on your best random guess. Experiment is clear? Okay. Now what happens is, as soon as we start the experiment, this screen is like this initially, right? And there will be a beep. You will have an audio phone, I mean like this phone, and immediately a beep will come when the experiment has started, and this yellow will appear somewhere in the screen, anywhere. And what you have to do, you have to start contracting your muscles so that you reach there. So let us say finally, and the trial will be for 1 second. So let us say you tried your best and you reach here. So I'll give you a score based on whether it is completely overlapped, whether how far you are from there. So let us say in this case, I give you a score of 82 out of 100, that you are very close but not very close. So are you trying to understand what is happening? What is the final message? Okay. Now there are 4 conditions. One is visual feedback plus proprioception feedback. Visual feedback means the first condition. You can see the cursor and there is a feedback coming from the motor. You know why motor? What I told about proprioception. It is the position of body's to ability to sense the joint position. So through motor, I am giving you that ability. Right? And the second condition is visual feedback only. No proprioception, but you can see that target. And the third one is you cannot see the target, but you can actually get a hint out of this proprioception. And finally, you don't have any feedback. Right? Now with this, you can make 2 types of errors. Right? Because when it is a 1D target, let us say when it is a 1D target, you can make only one kind of error, which is radial error. You got the point? Because you will never go there. You know it is a 1D target, so you will contract muscle, so you may either cross the target or you may short the target. Right? Similarly here, you may cross the target or you may short the target. So you will make only one kind of error, which is a radial error. Right? But when it is a 2D target, you can make 2 types of error. One is radial error, other is angular error. Because quite possible that you don't go in the same line, you fall somewhere in this. So this is like, let us say this is the original target and you reach somewhere here. So in this case, you make this much of radial error and this much of angular error. Right? But if it is a 1D target, you will either go there somewhere. So it will be only the radial error because there is no chance of making an angular error. Is that clear? Experiment is clear? Okay. So now results. What do you think? What is your hypothesis? What is your expected results? What should happen? Where will I perform the best? Okay, let me say, where will you perform the worst? Of course. No. Where will I perform the worst? Both feedback? Both feedback or no feedback? Of course. Right? No feedback. The random guess. Right? So of course that will make the highest error because I don't know. I am not getting any feedback from here, no information from here, no information from here. So I will make the maximum error. Right? But the results are very interesting. Of course, this result is very straightforward, and that was very, very naive. So we also got the same result that the participants actually, did most of the error when there was no feedback. But the interesting story was something like this. So you see here, these are 1D targets. So if you see for 1D targets, I don't have this 1D target means only radial error, right? And I have taken the magnitude of that. Why? Because you may either short the target, you may either overcross the target. So in both cases, it is error. So if I don't take absolute, it might look like I was better in this kind of error. So that's why we took the magnitude of that. Okay. But in the case of 1D target, you will never make an angular error. So you can see there is only one plot for 1D target. But in the case of 2D targets, what happens actually was there will be angular error as well as radial error. Fine. Okay. So now let us analyze the results. So as everybody of you convinced that with no feedback condition, the error is always high. Right? Whether it is a 1D target, whether it is a 2D target. Right? But interestingly, when there were 1D targets, the visual feedback, if you see this part, the visual feedback was more dominating than any kind of feedback. What does that mean? Means when I ask the participant that, okay, you can see the target, hit on it, he did it. But when I ask, okay, it is a target and you can see it, and let me give you additional information. that actually deteriorates the participant ability to click on the icon rather than helping the brain. But in the 1D targets. Right? Similarly, in the 2D targets, it happened the same thing. In fact, it was more prone in that area. You see, here the gap was very less, but here the gap increased. The radial error in 2D targets, if you see this one part, this visual feedback was again dominating. But what happened interestingly, which was we even did not hypothesize, but what we found was very interesting. Actually, this kind of artificial feedback helped a lot when it was about the orientation. So this kind of feedback helped us when it was about the orientation of the target, rather than it is the single 1D target. You got the point? So you can, so let me just finish this and then I'll discuss it. So what we found is there was no significant difference between this feedback and this feedback in 1D targets. Although it was little higher visual feedback, but across the participants, which were I think more than 100 participants or 120 participants, I think what we found, but there was no significant difference. What we conclude from here, either you give additional feedback or not give, doesn't matter for the participant, right? But what we found is that the angular error significantly reduces when you add the additional information of orientation through this motor, which makes sense actually. I mean, you can find a lot of experiment you can do right now here in this room, where you will find if you suppress the information of joint position to your brain, right, it will be more difficult for you to perform that action compared to if you give any other information. So what we found from this study was that artificial proprioception feedback supplied to the contralateral arm improves the myoelectric control, but in the absence of visual feedback only. If visual feedback is there, brain does not need any more feedback. Even it deteriorates. But that is the case only in the 1D targets. When it is of 2D targets, brain always needs more information. So I have an analogy which you may agree or not agree about that, but I can connect it to some kind of this thing. So if you have to read a very simple concept, like for example, Ohm's law, one book is good enough for you. You don't need any feedback. You don't need much higher material. But if you have to read something like machine learning, you will always be looking for like more books to find out which one is better. Right? So when it is a complex target, when it is a complex thing, brain always needs more feedback. Right? But if it is kind of a simple task, even this kind of additional information may be redundant to the brain. That is what was the outcome of this study. And then visual feedback always dominates only on feedback condition in both 1D and 2D targets that you have seen, right? If it is a 1D target, then your brain actually relies more on your visual feedback than your proprioception feedback. Okay, sorry. And this study, yeah. So you remember I told you that we restricted the hand of the subject. So why we did was because we were not having the ethical clearance to conduct the study on amputee that time. So we wanted to mimic the condition of a amputee. Same thing will happen in amputee, right? He will not have this hand, the front hand. He will only have this hand, and he will be like contracting his muscles. How do you control the prosthetic hand? You take the EMG signal from there, and then you move the hand. So exactly we try to mimic that situation. That assume that the person does not have his hand and he is controlling from this. Right? So that was the idea. Otherwise, for a healthy person, he can always do like this. So that's why we restricted this part, that we will not allow the patient hand, the healthy person to move his hand, so that we somehow reach to the approximation that his functioning is like an amputee person. Right? So that was one of the limitations. And yeah, so interestingly, this was one of the most popular article in IEEE transaction that time. I mean, I do 2015 in neural system and rehabilitation engineering. Yeah, so that was the first story. So yeah, so Peria is signing me. Stop. I'll stop here. So we'll conduct the second study later part. So if you have any question, I think 2-3 minutes I can take some questions.
How is it you how is it there was a motor and
And
so how did you provide information?
so that was very challenging. That only took us 6 months. So what you have to do is you have to go into the Microsoft Office program, in the operating system program, hack the coordinates of the actual mouse, what is coming from there, and then translate it to EMG. You got the point? Because cursor is not in my control. I don't know what are the coordinates of cursor. So you have to go into the program, the operating system program, somehow hack that what is there, what is the information, how does the actual program of the Microsoft actually decodes the coordinate of this cursor. Once you hack that program, you can convert into your EMG signal and then actuate it. So that was the most difficult part, most difficult part.
Sir, instead of giving the information feedback visually, did you try for audible feedback? Like, would that make any difference, or that would be?
Audible will be very difficult. Just assume that a amputee is holding something and you are telling him, hey, you have hold this cup, whether it is good or bad. It will look very embarrassing. You're getting this point. So giving feedback which is socially acceptable. Like if somebody, even somebody is using this artificial hand through this, might look little not socially acceptable. In fact, in my next study, I will show you that social acceptability of a device is rather more critical sometimes than the functionality. You may not agree, but I'll show you it in my next lecture. Right? So giving audio feedback, like for it is something like this. Okay, so this is my hand. This is bottle here. My eyes are closed. And you say, hey Deepak, go to your left. Okay, go to your right. No, little up, little down. Something like that. That's more cumbersome. Rather than you say me, okay, this is this information, let me grasp. So audio sometimes give you, I mean in prosthetic we do give audio feedback, but that's not very reliable. Right? So this is kind of a feedback which is more natural. Even you ask yourself, like how do you pick the bottle? Does your brain say something to you? No. It says to your muscles and then you pick it up. So audio feedback may not be a very good idea. Maybe for publication point of view it may work, but not for real time. That's a very good question. Yeah, we did. That was very important. So it was very important for us to get the subjects who are all right-handed or the left-handed. So we did this study, and in fact, it was not easy. This kind of experiment, we have to close the light when the experiment starts, and immediately when they come, we can't say that okay, the experiment is starting. We have to give them 1 hour to get trained with this kind of muscle actuation, because your brain is trained to do like this, and suddenly I say no, stick to your hand and then contract your muscle and reach to that target. So they need almost 1 hour training. But once 1 hour, and we also made sure that we take only those subjects who are not playing video games, because that could have created a biasness. So we removed all the participants who, like especially young, those who are doing this mobile game and all. So we took mostly like the adults, which does not play so many games. So that was one of the criteria. Like you said, one-handed rightness. Like we did not mix left-handed, right-handed, either left-handed only or right-handed only. So yeah, that was that we took into consideration.
Sir, will the results are applicable for the dynamic targets?
Yeah, any kind
will
of
be same for the dynamic targets?
Yeah, so we have not tested it exactly, and then this is to take a long time. So by the time I was coming back from UK, so we did not explicitly conduct it, but the second phase of this is still going on, where they are doing it on the exact dynamic targets. But that time we were just trying to prove the community that this simple concept in the real time can be scientifically proven, and we proved it. That was a simple, but of course it needs a little bit more aggressiveness to get into the real device and all. Because the idea is, what is the current status of feedback? How do they give the feedback to the amputee in the real time? Yeah, proprioception they give, but how do they give? And very few people give, like I think across the world. Even I was telling to Mike a few days back, in lower limb they give. So how do they give is, they put an implanted electrode on your muscles, right? The residual muscle. And whenever you go 20 degrees, they will give some kind of current, then 20 degrees, which is very good. They published in Nature, actually, they published in Nature. But then scientifically it is very good, but just imagine, just for giving a feedback, you are doing a surgery, you're putting an implant over there. So may not be very good at this stage, because that may lead to many complications in future. But they proved it. Like even they showed, they cited this paper and they said non-invasiveness may be good. And they showed actually, they have two control groups where they are providing the feedback like this, and the second where they are giving the exactly to the muscle invasiveness. And they said for the non-invasive invasiveness, the patient do not need any kind of training. Why? Because it is coming through the natural pathway. My hand is amputated, I am giving the same pathway. So it's a natural, he does not need any training. But in my case, he will need some training, because his brain is not trained to pick the hands through this hand. But the advantage is it is non-invasive. You don't need to do any surgery, right? But nowadays you will see in lower limb amputee population, recently they gave feedback on the residual muscles through injecting some charges in the muscles, and they implanted it. But when the patient was recovering from the surgery, next day he started 10-meter walk without any problem, no fatigue, natural kind of. But again, you have to see, like, it may be a good thing to publish in Nature, but then of course it will lead in future after down the line 10 years. Maybe this kind of feedback is very common. But right now we have to think, like, can we go for really non-invasiveness without compromising the accuracy, which is a challenge, but then we have to take that risk. Of course, of course. This control is very straightforward. It is not on frequency. It is based on statistical features. Because frequency, if you do, the problem will be patient will contract the muscle, and by the time the cursor move, it will be like 51 millisecond or 1 second or 2 seconds. So he should feel that everything is happening in real time. Means I contract and the cursor moves. Because if there is a delay, he will not be able to learn it. Right? So we wanted to make sure we don't use any frequency transformation or anything, just in the time domain. And it was very easy actually, because you will think, just a minute, because it is like you have to go here and here. So if the amplitude of this muscle goes little higher, go there. If the muscle of this amplitude goes, simple threshold based kind of thing. Because the idea was it has to go in the real time. The patient should feel like I contracted and the muscle and the cursor goes there. I contracted with the, if I put a frequency transformation in between and then took feature and then classification, by the time he contracted, the cursor is like after 2 seconds it is moving there. So that is not good for the brain to learn the new things.
What was the purpose of the mirror?
Oh, that's interesting. So, which one? This mirror?
There's a mirror.
Yeah. So actually the monitor was placed like this. So monitor was a bit height. And then because he cannot see monitor like this, so there was a mirror so that he can see the image there, doing something like this. So it is just because of, and there was one protocol associated with this, which was like finding the concurrence, like if I change the muscles 180 degree, I mean like the cursor position 180 degree, how does brain behaves? That's a entirely new paper which we published. But yeah, of course, mirror was there. So this setup was for 2-3 experiments. So I discussed only one part. But in this case, mirror helped us because the monitor of the cursor was like this. So he has to see my computer if we don't put mirror. So mirror is there. So now whatever changes he can see here.
So in case of no feedback part of the experiment, you remove the mirror.
No. In case of no feedback, what will happen? The experiment will start. He will listen to audio. Audio means there is somewhere in the screen it is. So if it is a visual feedback, then he can see where it is in the screen. So imagine that I come, I put all the gloves, experiment is started. I can see there, it's actually here in the monitor, but I'm seeing here in the mirror. And suddenly a beep will come. Tick, means the experiment has started. The cursor should be somewhere in your screen. So if it is from the visual part, I can see, oh, it is in the screen, I'll go there. If it is from visual first feed, PF, means perhaps I'll go there, and similarly the motor will move. In one case, beep will come. So I know the cursor is somewhere in the, but I cannot see it. Will not display it. You got the point?
You are just like remove the display of the cursor.
Not this cursor will be there somewhere, but
it's not displayed.
Yes, it will not be displayed. So we hide it through programming. Like it will be there definitely. So no experimental change. It was not that we covered the mirror or anything. It will not come, but it will be there. You cannot see it. It was just a simple program. Yeah, let's go for T. Good.